Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a turn-based RPG developed by Sandfall Interactive, a French indie studio, and published by Kepler Interactive. This is actually Sandfall Interactive's debut game, which is super impressive, and Kepler Interactive has published a few games you might know. Most notably, I think, Rematch, which is that soccer game that everyone on Twitch played for like 2 days. Clair Obscur lets you build up a party of characters to take on the weird creatures on this mysterious island through turn-based combat and pseudo-open-world exploration. So even though this game is turn-based, it's actually usually just your turn to watch another cutscene. I know everyone memes on this already, but it's insane just how much my gameplay time was spent watching the movie. It looks great and all, don't get me wrong, but I had to play this game an extra hour because in my first 2 hours of gameplay, over an hour and a half of it was cutscenes. Admittedly, there is an option to skip them, but a lot of times the cutscenes have important information in them, and when I skipped, I often regretted it. That being said, the story seems relatively compelling, so I'm not really knocking this too badly, but it has to be said because I know some people are not into video game stories, and that makes this an automatic skip for them. But okay, that aside, for real, the combat is turn-based, but there's definitely a lot more to it than that. When it's your turn to attack, you select what you want to do from the menus like a normal turn-based combat game. Characters have a basic attack that's free to use and generates AP, and skills which spend AP and usually trigger some kind of quick time event to increase their damage. Characters can only do one thing per turn, but they can use any AP they have to fire some bullets at enemies. Enemies have weak spots, and sometimes you can do serious damage with these shots, so it's always worth considering. The combat gets a lot more interesting when it's not your turn though. Enemies can attack you or your party as a whole with a variety of attacks and combos. Characters, or sometimes your whole party in unison, can either dodge or parry these attacks to avoid the damage. Parrying is much more difficult than dodging, but when you succeed, you get to counterattack the enemy for some pretty major damage. The combat is also crazy stylish. All the animation is super smooth, and things like the quick time events and parries feel like they have a lot of weight. The game rewards you for doing cool stuff, and gives you a ton of opportunities to feel like you're doing cool stuff. It's like if those modern Doom games were turn-based combat. The constant interaction keeps you engaged in the fight the whole time, which I think is very rare for a turn-based combat game. Each character also has their own unique mechanic. The main guy, Gustav, has this electric arm that you charge up by hitting enemies. His first skill is a combo attack that generates a lot of charges, and then his second skill unleashes them for bonus damage per charge. The second character has this rune system that encourages you to chain different types of elemental magic to power them up. Spells generate runes of a different type. So for example, your ice spell might generate a fire rune. Then your fire spell might consume that fire rune to do extra damage or become a guaranteed critical hit or something like that. Then that spell might generate like an earth rune, and then you can just keep the chain going. I think this is really good design. The game barely taught me how some of these systems work, but it really didn't need to. Just by reading each character's first 2 or 3 abilities, it was immediately clear how the system was intended to be used, and it immediately got me thinking about what new abilities I wanted to unlock in order to make use of the unique system that character had access to. Speaking of which, characters can unlock new abilities by spending points they get on level up on a skill tree. There isn't really a lot to say here. The system's pretty generic, but it works well enough. Characters also have weapons equipped that seem to do something later, but in the time that I played, they kind of just existed in my inventory. But they also have Lumina skills, which is an interesting system. Each character can have 3 of these spirit things equipped at a time that give a passive buff, like a 20% chance to burn on basic attacks or something. If you win enough battles with the spirits equipped, you can use that passive ability on any character without equipping the spirit, at the cost of a certain amount of Lumina points being used up on that character. There seems to be plenty of ways to increase the Lumina points characters have, including just leveling them up, which means by the end game you could have a ton of passive abilities, or at least a few really strong ones, on all of your characters. What's cool though is you can still equip the spirit thing to get the passive effect, but only one character can have it equipped, whereas any number of characters can use it via the Lumina points. The system's cool because you theoretically want to give expensive skills to your characters via the equipped spirit. That way you can save the Lumina points for other passives, but since you can only do that once per skill, it means you have to pick which character is going to get the skill for free and which characters are going to have to cough up their Lumina points. I know that was a mouthful to explain, but I promise it's not that complicated when you do it yourself. I think every turn-based game needs to have like a million systems, or else it kind of just gets boring. No lack of systems in this game though. Honestly, all of this being said, the combat is actually really fun, especially for a turn-based game where I feel like the combat can sometimes drag along or become too scripted once you've figured out your character's best skills or actions. Things Things like the gun and the parry versus the dodge change the flow of combat a lot and make your turns look super different between every fight. But that's like 40% of the first few hours of this game at most. The rest is traversing an overworld that kind of feels completely pointless, or watching the movie, which is fine. The first thing, the overworld is pretty lame. It looks nice overall, but there really isn't much besides random items that are too tame to be excited about getting, but seem too useful to stop looking for. Invisible walls are everywhere, and I got turned around pretty often because there's no minimap, and you low-key face a random direction after every battle, or something. I don't know what was going on, but I was tripping out every time I had a fight. I had no idea where I was. There's also this other overworld mode where you move on like a map or something instead of just in the world like normal. Kind of reminds me of some of the older turn-based RPGs, but besides the nostalgia factor of that, these are basically the same exact thing as the normal overworld maps. There isn't really much to say here except that it felt like the overworld was just taking time away from the better things this game has to offer. Alright, okay, so finally the movies. The movies are pretty okay. The basic premise of the story is that when people turn a certain age in this city, they get Thanos snapped by this big lady called the Paintress that lives like across the river on this island. So the expeditions go over there to try to figure out what's up or kill her or something, but obviously they don't work. There's a big number that the Paintress writes and she changes it from 34 to 33 when the game starts, but I don't really know what that number means exactly. I know that the game is Expedition 33 and that's obviously the expedition we go on, but was the one before ours 34? Or maybe she kills all the 33-year-olds now or something? It's kind of unclear whether the number is counting down. I mean, it is, but I don't know if it's supposed to be. It doesn't seem like the characters in the game are treating it that way, but maybe that's what's going on. Then the expeditions are kind of numbered randomly. They mentioned Expedition 0 early in the game, but then I also saw Expedition 69 mentioned, which is awesome by the way. But so how are we Expedition 33? Like, how do the expeditions get counted? Maybe that's explained later, but it didn't make any sense. So, okay, we go to the island, we meet this old guy who shouldn't exist because the old people are supposed to be killed by the Paintress, and he kills all of us with the help of these creepy monster things. We barely escape, but then we're out there on our own. We meet some other characters as we explore, and they'll end up joining our party as well. Overall, you really cannot do anything of note in this game without watching a 15-minute cutscene about it. It is genuinely insane. They look good, the writing is fine, the acting's good, but you will have to watch a 15-minute cutscene every 25 minutes. That's just how this goes. Your first full hour of gameplay is almost all cutscene, and the parts that aren't barely qualify as gameplay. It's literally just walking between cutscenes for an hour and a half. The movement's not even good either, so there's nothing fun about it. The combat though is genuinely so fun. Everything I say about this game, everything I write, it just takes me back to how much I enjoyed fighting things when I got the chance to do it. The start of this game is a bit of a slog if you either aren't invested in the story or aren't willing to just try and skip it and figure out what you're supposed to do. But I really do think that once you get through the 2 hours, you actually get to play the real game, which is such a shame because I hate when games do this, but I like the combat enough that I'll definitely be playing this one again. Overall though, if you don't have 2 hours to throw away and you don't think you want to watch a movie that's just okay before you get to have some fun, you can genuinely skip this one. Obviously, this is one of the most hyped games of the year, and for that reason alone, it might be worth checking out. I can understand why you might want to, but despite that, I really don't think this game is for everyone. If you're interested in the little bits of story that you've seen here, or think you can slog through some cutscenes, this game is probably a guaranteed pickup, and I think it has a lot of hours of fun for you. But if not, I would skip it and maybe check out my other videos for a better recommendation.